Hello, and thank you for joining us today. If your organization is using Jira to manage work, you already know it's a powerful system for capturing tasks, issues, and projects. But as work scales across departments, teams, and priorities, many teams struggle to stay aligned, manage capacity, and measure performance. That's where the Tempo platform comes in. Today, I'll introduce how Tempo helps you unify strategy, execution, and reporting right inside Jira. My name is Chris Chappelear. People call me Chappy. I'm one of Tempo's senior product marketing managers. And with me is Robbie Abbey, one of our esteemed solutions engineers who will be providing the demo later in the presentation. Before I get started, just want to say that the recording of this webinar will be shared with registrants and attendees, be emailed out. During the presentation, attendee microphones are muted, but we will be using the Q&A feature, and we'll be answering questions in the background and some of them live toward the end. And just to note, we are talking about the cloud versions of our apps as opposed to DC or server. Brief agenda, we're going to talk about the big challenges of managing portfolios in Jira, and talk about some key value pillars for Jira users that Tempo provides. Then we're going to talk about the tools and technologies that help support those value pillars, as well as a product demo from Robbie Abbey, and then we'll get into some Q&A. So let's start with the challenges. Jira is excellent for tracking tasks, but strategic alignment, resource planning, financial visibility, and executive reporting often fall outside of Jira. This creates disconnected workflows. Strategic planning happens in spreadsheets or slides, resource allocation is reactive, and reporting is cobbled together at the last minute from different systems. Now, these gaps can lead to missed deadlines, unbalanced teams, and poor ROI visibility. So Tempo bridges those gaps. We've built a unified platform that works entirely within Jira, so your teams can plan, execute, and report without switching tools. Whether you're setting high-level strategy, structuring large initiatives, tracking time and costs, or delivering executive reports, the Tempo platform brings all of that together seamlessly. So how do we bring everything together? Luckily, Tempo has a broad modular portfolio that allows organizations to start with their greatest need or greatest level of comfort. When it comes to effective Jira management, there's some key functionality pillars that, when working together, can solve a large number of use cases when it comes to operating and development cost visibility. Now, these four pillars are capacity planning and management to help prevent burnout, reduce downtime, and improve project delivery, time tracking to ensure billing accuracy and reporting, financial management to ensure relative budget visibility and prevent overspending, and reporting and auditing to improve accountability and compliance with financial regulations. As I mentioned before, with all these pillars working together, you can now properly align Jira projects with financial goals and improve cost forecasting and capacity planning. Now I want to take a few minutes to give a brief overview of the specific solutions within the Tempo portfolio. Firstly, project and portfolio management requires a clear understanding of how project costs align with broader business objectives. Structure provides that high-level visibility that can be tailored to your organization's reporting needs. Structure aggregates data from multiple projects for a holistic view of organizational health and ensures teams and team members are allocated to the most strategic initiatives, maximizing project and product performance. Effective management includes strategically planning the work of your team members. Capacity Planner provides powerful capacity and skill set management capabilities directly within Jira. This tool lets you assess team capacity to avoid over or underutilization of your teams and team members, ensuring project budgets align with availability. Now, one of the biggest challenges tech companies face is understanding where time, and therefore money, is being spent. Timesheets provides a solution by delivering accurate time tracking directly within Jira. With Timesheets, you can maintain transparent and traceable time data to meet compliance standards and streamline resource planning. Now, in addition to tracking time, we can use that data to manage costs effectively. Financial Manager gives you real-time visibility into your project budgets and expenses, helping you keep financials on track. With Financial Manager, you can set, monitor, and adjust budgets at the project level to maintain financial control and avoid overspending. You can also calculate project costs using data from Timesheets and Capacity Planner to link work done with financial impact, as well as forecast your project costs based on that planned and actual data. For example, if you were contracted to create an app for $20,000 over a 3-month time frame, you can use a fixed price project to track the expenses you're incurring, including your labor costs. Custom charts for Jira makes it easy to visualize data and build audit-ready reports, enhancing transparency and governance. With custom charts, you can create customized dashboards to transform complex data into clear insights for better time and cost management, in addition to meeting compliance and auditing demands. Now, for more advanced data analysis, BI connectors integrate your Jira data with leading BI tools, offering deeper insights and strategic guidance. You can seamlessly connect Jira data with BI tools like Power BI and Tableau for comprehensive cost and resource analysis, as well as combine Jira project data with ERP system metrics to gain a full financial picture. Now, strategic alignment requires not only managing current priorities, but also planning future investments. Strategic roadmaps helps you build roadmaps that align with your business goals. With strategic roadmaps, everything comes full circle as you can now visualize investments over time, ensuring alignment with strategic initiatives and constraints. You could also prioritize projects based on organizational and customer value, helping you prioritize to the initiatives that matter most. Now, I think you've heard me talk for enough time. I'm going to turn it over to our solutions engineer, Robbie Abbey, to give a product demo.
Cool. Thanks, Chappie. I appreciate that. I know we got a lot of folks on here, so I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A. So if there's anything that pops up in there, I'll be sure to jump right into that. And of course, we'll have plenty of time at the end if we don't dig into it as we go through. So I'm just going to kind of start off where Chappie ended. Just kind of giving an idea. I know that a lot of folks sort of look at that data, as a circle. You've got your planning, you've got your time tracking, so on and so forth. But the way that I like to think about it is almost like a cascade. You have essentially you start off with something like structure, which we'll talk about in just a second, where you're kind of deciding what do we need to do and when do we need to do it. Capacity planner is great for figuring out, who actually has the ability to handle this. When can they take this on? What does that look like on that side? And being able to understand who's has availability to actually work on something, both from the team and also the individual resource level. Timesheets, as Chappie mentioned, a lot of folks out there that are currently using timesheets, and the key to that is making sure that we've got that clean timekeeping data, so that we're not just logging specifically what did somebody work on and for how long. We want to know more about that. What were they doing? Is this CapEx? Is this OpEx? Is this billable or non-billable? Kind of being able to track that sort of information is really what sets timesheets apart. And then, of course, we'll also talk about Financial Manager, which, as Chappie kind of mentioned, takes all that information from Capacity Planner and then also all that information from timesheets, really brings a lot of that information together, shows you the cost, any revenue that you might have coming in, just a lot of good information in there. And of course, we'll also touch on the custom charts side of things. How do you visualize that data? We'll talk about it both in custom charts as a dashboard, and then we'll also look at the BI connectors from that side as well. So first things first, as I kind of like to mention, everything from structure all the way down to custom charts lives in Jira. So we'll might touch on strategic roadmaps a little bit at the end. As Chappie mentioned, that is sort of a SaaS product, so it lives outside of Jira. But structure, capacity planner, timesheets, financial manager, custom charts, all that stuff lives within Jira. So makes it a lot easier for folks to be able to access that kind of information in here. So let's jump right into structure. So I'm in Jira right now. I've gone to my apps. I've gone directly into structure. You can also get to structure through the Tempo app in there. But one of the things that a lot of folks sort of struggle with in sort of that native Jira planning is that it's not particularly customizable, not terribly flexible for folks who work across a bunch of different types of teams, folks that might work in sprints, folks that might not, people that just have different work methodologies. So structure is great for being able to kind of display all of those individual like high level themes, initiatives, epics that folks might be working on, and sort of be able to visualize those all together despite what team they might be on. The great part about structure, and I think that's part of that kind of goes to that auditing side of things, is the ability to set up both timelines and then also baselines for your work. So if you have, for example, you're going through and you're, setting up, here are my high level objectives. Let's say we've sort of inserted a bunch of different things in here that we've got that we're going to be working on. We have it all the way from theme to initiative. You can go all the way down to tasks and subtasks if you want to. Some folks still like to use this at a higher level, kind of keep it at the theme or initiative and epic level, but you can get really, very granular with it. So over here on the side or on the right, we can see the Gantt part of structure where we're actually showing those timelines, being able to kind of view exactly when things might be done, any dependencies that have either been set up in structure or in Jira, and those two things can be synced between the two. So if you see, for example, lines that are going between two items will kind of indicate, hey, this is dependent on this. This might be a blocker of something else. It also gives you indications of if there's a scheduling conflict, and that might have something to do with maybe the estimate of when it needs to be completed. Are there any dependencies that are kind of backwards in this particular layout that might need to be adjusted? And it lets you get that visibility in there and say, hey, if we actually want to be able to complete this, when do we need to schedule this for? What's our allotted time? You can click on that individual item. You can either move it if you want to, or you can actually get suggestions for scheduling. Like, what is my estimate? Do I need to automatically schedule and push that out and see what that looks like? And the way that we track those sort of changes, the way that we're kind of noting that is when you set up a baseline when you're initially setting up your structure. So as you add items to this list, either through a generator or a filter or insert, you can pull in whatever you need to. We'll get sort of that baseline. You can kind of see this dashed line here that sort of indicates this is when we had initially planned it. It's been moved back by forward by 4 weeks so that we get that indicator on here that this was our baseline. This is what it looks like now. And we can also see that either, underestimation, any changes, any delta in that time using the columns up here at the top. So lots of folks will use these columns in a bunch of different ways. So we have folks that might want to add in their own formulas or set exactly what their progress looks like. Again, if you're looking at that from a high level, you want to be able to see, either progress by story points or, the total amount of work that's been done versus what's been estimated. You can kind of have that set in a number of different ways, being able to track it by status if you need to. You can also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, pull in information from a capacity planner or from timesheets so that you could see what is my planned time on this particular item or what is my logged time total. So lots of different ways that we can use structure to not only calculate those things, but then also visualize them over here on the side and understand what those time frames look like. So, this is not necessarily the only way to use structure. In this case, we've got this kind of from a top down, but if we were to switch over to perhaps a different structure and be able to look at this in a bunch of different ways. So maybe we want to take that information and rather than grouping it by theme or by initiative or whatever it might be, we might want to look at this by sprint, by squad, or, what are my squads working on in each sprint? So you can filter that, group that in certain ways and see exactly what your teams are working on each individual sprint and have that broken out as well. So structure is, and this is kind of a weird way to say it, but it is what you make of it. There's a lot of different ways that you can set it up. We have folks that will have a ton of different structures in their organization, just depending on what kind of view they want to have. So some folks might want to look at it this way. Other folks might be interested in seeing it again at that high level, what all's being worked on and what the progress is. Other folks might want to see that breakdown by sprint and kind of line that up with people who are not working in sprints. So again, structure is great for visualizing that and planning exactly what you need to work on and then get an idea of when it needs to be completed. So once we've got that stuff in place, so let's say we've got all those things, planned out, we know when we need to have things completed by, maybe we need to look at who has the ability to actually do the work. So that's when we might switch over to Tempo Capacity Planner. Now, I'm in my app, my Tempo app right now. Again, you go in here. Over here on the side is Tempo Planning. So right now, what I'm looking at is that planning at a team level. So, tempo teams can be synced with things like Jira teams if you want to. Other folks might set up tempo teams by project, or, just by grouping. Like maybe you have, normally you might have a group of engineers who work on one specific type of work, and then you might pull folks out of those teams into other teams for a specific project. Tempo teams can be really good for that. So being able to do the high level planning from the team side, and then also being able to see who's on that team and what are they working on. So we have our high level, maybe we put a project up here for an overall look at, what that particular team might be working on. The individual tasks might be assigned to the individuals who are on that team. Cool thing about tempo teams is a couple different things. First of all, you can be shared across different tempo teams. So, for example, Nikita here has a bunch of different teams that she's a member of, and we could see that she's shared across those teams. So she may have capacity sort of split between multiple projects that she's working on. We could see that up here at the top. If you hover over this bar, it will pull down that sort of utilization rate, what their capacity is, what are they working on as an individual versus what is being done as a high level team plan. So it gives you that kind of good information about what exactly their availability is, what can they actually take on, and if things need to be shifted around. As you're viewing this and you see a whole bunch of red bars, you might want to say, okay, we've got some additional capacity during this particular time frame. You can look at this by weeks, months, quarters, any way that you want to from that team level view. You can also do things like flex planning. So if you're, for example, you want to be able to put a plan in, you want to be able to report on it, you want to be able to do some estimates for that future, the future planning. You can use those flex plans up at the top to create, say, some time that we don't know who we're going to assign this to, but we know exactly what needs to be worked on. You can use this to kind of filter on different issues, projects, tasks, epics, whatever it might be able to come in and say, hey, I think I'm going to need probably, 20 hours maybe to work on this particular thing. I don't have to assign a team to it yet. I can just put that plan up at the top, sort of use it like a sticky note, if you will, to say like, hey, I'm going to need somebody to work on this during this time. Who do we actually have available? And that's when you can come in and see on these teams who's got some time. We could see that heavy metal has got green up here. They're pretty much perfectly at capacity. If somebody's in orange, maybe they have a little bit of, wiggle room where they might be able to take that on. And you could just click and drag that down to that team and allow them to, sort of take that on, view what the effects are on their capacity. And it all really comes down to who do we have, what teams are available and can actually work on this particular type of thing. So when we're looking at it from the team view, of course, we have the ability to see what individuals are working on, but we do also have a resource specific view. So again, sort of disregarding the teams, if we wanted to just look at what individuals were working on, we have some great integrations in here. Now we could see exactly what people are working on, what their capacity looks like over different times or weeks, whatever they might be working on. And then we can also do things like integrations with Google Calendar or Outlook or Office 365 calendars to get a true idea of what their capacity is. So people may be, it may say that you have 8 hours in a day, but, if you've got 3 hours worth of meetings, do you really have 8 hours that you can do work during? That's the great part about that calendar integration, is that it takes that into account. So when we click on that, we could see any calendar events that they might have. Those can be private, of course. A lot of folks will set it up to just show that they're busy or whatever, or out of office, PTO, whatever they might be doing. And so that kind of keeps what is on their calendar private, but it allows you to see, hey, maybe they only have 5 hours of capacity available during that time. Also incorporates with things like holidays, time off, things like that. We'll be able to see that in there. So as we do that capacity planning, either from the team side or from the individual side, it gives us that good information that we can use in as we log time to be able to compare what is our planned versus our actual work that's being done. So that's kind of going to segue me into timesheets and exactly how that works. The way that a lot of folks are going to be experiencing timesheets is going to be directly on whatever Jira issue or task that they're working on. So down here at the bottom, we'll have our tempo work logs. All they're doing is clicking on log time. And we can ask for a lot of information about this. Again, a lot of folks kind of approach that that timekeeping or time logging as dirty data. They're looking at it from the standpoint of, do we actually have the correct time? Is it associated with the correct account that's being worked on, so on and so forth. So we're trying to make that data as clean as possible for folks, while also making it really simple for them to log that time. So if somebody, let's say, is wanting to log some time on here and they spent, maybe 2 hours on this particular task during the day, yes, we can just simply click log time at this point. But if you want to get some additional data, we have the ability to add in sort of customized fields that you can have folks collect. If you want them to be able to put in things like what type of work is being done. Is there a specific, like, is this QA, is this front end, back end? You can add in, as many different kinds of lists that you want. Of course, within reason, you want folks to be able to quickly log that time, but you want to still be able to give them the option to say, while I was working on this, this was a, this type of billable or non-billable hour, perhaps, time that I'm working on. You can select from the accounts, and those accounts will go into things like financial manager, cost tracking within custom charts. So we're capturing that kind of info. But then we also have things like type of work, again, down there at the bottom. So all they really have to do is put in time. But if you require something like an account to be entered, or if you want some additional data to be collected, you can do that as well. So we'll just go ahead and log some time on this particular issue. So again, really easy process for them to do that as they're on the actual ticket itself. But if, let's say, they forget, it happens, people are kind of doing their work, they forget to log their time. That's where they can go into the my work part of Tempo, and see everything that they've either done or have touched or have had planned for them, or meetings that show up in their calendar. So lots of different ways that we can ensure, again, that we're getting clean data for logging time based on things that have been planned for them, or what they've kind of visited during the day as they're kind of clicking through, maybe checking to see what's in their log to actually work on. So in our timesheets, sort of that user interface, we could see, for example, things that have been like time that's already been logged. So I just logged that one particular time block right there. If you have anything that's planned for you in Capacity Planner, it can also show up in here too under plans. So these are things that have sort of been assigned to me for that day. We could see that, probably someone got a little overzealous with their time request here, 9 hours on this particular issue. But as you plan, it'll go through and sort of split that up across several days when you're actually sort of dragging and dropping to make those plans. So they can either come in and just click log time, and to be able to do that, or they can edit it, select things like accounts if that's something that's required to be able to log that time both efficiently but also accurately. We do also have the ability to kind of see if there's something that they've sort of worked on or spent a lot of time on in Jira. It'll show up here as a recommended thing for them to log time. We also have, as you can see in red, these are calendar integrations. So if you have a meeting that's on your calendar, if it has something like a Jira tag that is, either in the subject or the body of that event, you'll be able to see that in there. Hey, I probably spent about 15 minutes on this. I can log that time. Or I know I did this. Let's go ahead and log that time as well. So they don't have to go through and do each one of those items individually. There is certainly something to be said for granularity when it comes to going through and clicking on all of it. But if they generally keep a pretty accurate calendar, you can come up and just click on log activities. It will kind of prompt you and say, are you sure you did work on this? Does this put you over your time? Do you want to make sure that that's correct? But once they confirm that, it'll log anything that was on their calendar. They can come in and log those plans. As we could see, it kind of kept us from doing that because it was a little over what our time frame would be. So it's very easy for them to come in and see what needs to be logged that maybe they missed as they worked on things. And if they're doing this kind of regularly, you can come over here to our issue picker and go to recent issues. It'll show anything that you touched recently in Jira, and you can just easily drag and drop that over to whatever day that is, be able to easily log that time on there. So it's kind of serves as a reminder. Here's what you did, over the past couple of days. Maybe you want to log some time on there. So we're taking all that information, again, structure lets you plan out what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. Capacity planner is great for who is actually doing that work and who has the capacity. And then timesheets captures things like the how and why of the actual work itself. So, what did I work on? How long did I spend on it? What was actually being worked on? Is this a, certain kind of expense that I need to put in? What is this costing? All of that can be tracked within that timekeeping side of things. So what are we doing with all that data? How do we report on all that and audit and see exactly what's been done? So there's three different sort of approaches to that that we'll talk about today. First off, we could talk about just the basic tempo reporting. And I use the word basic pretty lightly. There's a lot that you can do within that tempo reporting. For example, when I switch over into my reports, the first one that I've got built out is a plan versus actual report. So again, what did we plan versus what did people actually log time for? This particular one is filtered on specific projects. So right now we're looking at it from the project side of things. So what's my planned time versus my actual? But if you wanted to break it down into, a little bit more granular chunks, if you will, you could look at it by team. You can add in things like individual users. You can report on fields that are in Jira if you want to have it sort of grouped in that way, or custom fields that you may have set up. So lots of different ways that we can filter that data and say, for example, on this Android project on the Hard Rock team, Daniel was planned to work 8 hours, and Daniel, you didn't actually spend any time on that. So you can see in there exactly down to the person, what were they planned? What did they actually do? Were they working on things that were sort of outside of what was planned? I know that there are a lot of folks who, they have things that are planned for them for the day, but then, something comes up and they get pulled into something else. We want to make sure that we could see that kind of information in our plan versus actual report. So was this something that was actually on their list of things to do, or did they get sort of pulled away to work on something else? How does that affect our plan versus actual? How does it affect our progress on certain issues and things that they might be working on? That kind of information can really be shown in those types of reports as it is. So lots of different types of reports within that reporting. So again, if you just want to see a plan time of your team's capacity, we do have capacity reporting. Just a straight up logged time report. This could be broken down by, Jira project and the account that they're actually logging the time on. So we'd be able to see, for example, on this particular project, these are the different accounts that had time logged on them during specific, areas. You could see exactly who did that work. When did they log it? How much time was logged? So there's a lot of good information within those reports that you can kind of drill down into. So this shows a lot of things about, what was planned versus what was actually done. But again, the key to what we're talking about today is going to be the cost. What does this cost me? If there's revenue involved, how much revenue should I expect to be able to, kind of get from these different activities? And that's where financial manager is going to come into play. And that's another part of, again, this Tempo app. I've already got it opened here on the side. So we can see, for example, in here in this particular project, and I'll actually back out into my financial manager main screen here. You can have projects within financial manager when we say projects, we're kind of really referring to specific scopes that you care about and want to report on. So you can have multiple Jira projects being in that scope for a financial manager project. So whether you are doing this by money or by time, any of those different things can be shown in here. So if I, for example, click on my under budget example, which I just had a little bit earlier, there's a specific scope to this particular report. So on this overview, we could see things like, for example, what is my budget milestone? Do I have budgets at a specific period of time? My labor cost, any expenses that might be associated with that team or that project that they're working on, any revenue if you have billable hours that are being logged. So lots of different ways that you can look at this within that scope, kind of see that breakdown of what is my cost, my revenue, and my remaining budget. And again, I think there was a question that was asked a little bit earlier, CapEx versus OpEx. You can kind of get that information down here at the bottom based on what account people log their time in timesheets. So if you have a Tempo account that is, set up for, capital expenses versus operational, you could see that information when they log time. You can get a breakdown, what did different accounts actually had that time logged? What was the cost that was associated with that? And be able to view all of that pretty granularly in here. So, and when we talk about scope, we can take that information and see exactly what's part of that scope that we've set up. Now, I have this integrated with, basically a strategic roadmaps integrated structure. So where I know that's a little bit outside of what we're talking about today, but you can pull that information. You can set that scope based on JQL queries. You could set it based upon a structure that you have set up specifically, just groupings of projects if you want, and being able to see exactly what's part of that, anything that's been actually worked on, completed, what was my cost just for this one task or this epic. I can see that broken down here, my time spent, my revenue, any billable time that might be associated with it, and have that roll up to that higher level hierarchy. So we can view exactly what those costs and revenue were that were generated by that particular project in there. Your team is always going to show as well. So if you want to see exactly what those team members were working on, and again, the team is whoever is part of that scope for that financial manager project. So we could see exactly what each one of these folks did and what their revenue was. I do like to kind of say just outright, this is demo data. This is not real. So, as we're going through, as we're logging this in the demo environment, we could see exactly, we have a lot of folks that are members here, but this is, of course, demonstration data. So as we talk about the teams and their costs, we can also add in things like expenses. So if you have things like recurring licenses that are part of that project, or infrastructure, like you need to buy new servers or something like that, that can show up in here as well. And we're going to keep that sort of in mind when we're calculating, like, what is my cost? You can have costs for actual labor. You can have costs that needs to be, associated with different types of licenses for development, your Jira costs, for example, those kinds of things can roll up and show in those projects. Revenue is a great way to look at it too, very similar to what you might see on the expenses side. Approvals, if there's different folks that are working on these projects and they need to have their time approved to actually be put into and included, you can add that visibility in there. The great part about this financial manager configuration is that where are we getting all of that cost rate and billing rate information from? Can be set up by project. So if we come into that configuration, we could see exactly, what are our budget milestones, who's actually a member of this particular project. But then also you can set up cost rates for the individuals on those teams. So if someone like Abdallah were to come in, what is that cost rate? Can it change? Does it, depend on what project they're working on as far as what that cost is? Same thing with billing rates, sort of being able to see really granularly, if we have this person work on this particular project or issue or whatever it is, what kind of billing can they do as a result of that? So that kind of ties again into the revenue that we're getting out of financial managers. So seeing that overview kind of pulls all that information together. If you're doing things like planning and you have individuals that are assigned to those plans, tasks that they're going to be working on in the future, you kind of see this day line here. These are our actuals and these are our forecasts. So as we're looking at our planner, things like in capacity planner, whatever it is for that scope, who's going to be doing the work? Is it going to be billable, non-billable? Is it capital? Is it operational expenses that they're working on? So we're going to see all that information, and it should be able to project for us what we should be able to get either in cost or revenue for that project, depending on what that scope is. So again, once we're kind of looking at it again from, structure all the way to capacity planner, timesheets for timekeeping, financial manager for reporting the costs and billing, being able to report on it. Sometimes you have folks who don't necessarily want to have to get into this to be able to see that reporting. You want to be able to make a dashboard out of it. And that's really where something like custom charts is going to come into play. So I'm in my Tempo dashboard here. Custom charts is a great way to kind of create your own visualizations of that data. We'll talk about this Power BI report in just a second. But as you kind of go through, you could set up different types of reports in your dashboard. So, for example, if you wanted to look at like a plan versus actual and have that be part of your personal dashboard, how are my teams contributing to the different things? How much time are they spending on different programs that we're working on? You know, time logged by team by epic. You can kind of see that all that information within custom charts and be able to report on that at a high level. So it's a really good way to kind of take the information that would, you know, as a lot of folks would say, otherwise be an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. And you want to take that and make that look good within Jira. That's really where those dashboard apps like custom charts are going to come into play. Now, we know that, you know, especially in our field, especially when it comes to auditing, sometimes you just got to see the data you want, the way that you want to. And we have a lot of folks that are using things like Power BI or Tableau to kind of pull that, extract that data, marry it with other, you know, data sources and kind of pull it all into one place. Chappie kind of mentioned this during those first initial slides, being able to kind of create a, you know, have a Power BI connector to be able to pull out that information. What we saw in Financial Manager is going to look a lot like what we see in our Power BI report here. So if you have something that you need to publish this or share this out without necessarily giving them access to, you know, directly into the Tempo app, you can use something like a BI report to pull that information out. See that a little bit more granularly, all in one dashboard gadget. Really makes it a whole lot easier to see the information and kind of keep an eye on it as it goes through in real time as people are working. So, sort of last but not least, I kind of wanted to circle back to our cascade and just kind of talk about that just really quickly. Again, today we looked at structure. How do you plan exactly what you're working on, when it can be done? Capacity planner, again, looking at it from a team perspective or an individual resource perspective, being able to see that capacity, move things around and sort of balance that across the board. Timesheets, again, very, very important for the auditing process, because we can plan all day long, but until we actually have the actuals of what people are doing and getting that granular data about accounts and, you know, the type of work that they're doing or whatever information you want to collect and having that be reportable is so important for the part of, you know, just auditing exactly what's going on. And when that's tied to costs or billing, that's when Financial Manager comes into play. You know, what are my expenses? What are my labor costs? You know, how much is this team costing me to work on this project versus their billable time? Like, how much are they making me at that point? And then being able to sort of bubble that up into custom charts or using the BI connector to kind of broadcast that as needed. The last thing that we didn't really touch on today, but then we have you know, there's a great opportunity there. I think Chappie kind of mentioned strategic roadmaps at the beginning there. Being able to kind of take all this data from structure and planner and timesheets, being able to publish that in an easy to view roadmap to be able to track that at a high level is incredibly important. And it makes it a whole lot easier for folks who can't get into Jira or don't have any interest in getting into Jira, but still need to see what the progress is, the time frame for things in a roadmap, visualize that in a bunch of different ways. That's where strategic roadmaps can come into play to make all that very granular information and structure available to folks who just want to see it at a high level and visualize it. So at this point, you know, I appreciate. I think, as Chappie said, you know, y'all have certainly heard me and listened to me talk enough. Chappie, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you, and we can kind of go from that point. But thanks, everybody.
So now let's get into the Q&A here. Second here. Let's see what we got.
Chappie, there was a question in there about it's basically like, can you talk a little bit more about how Timesheets integrates with other Tempo products and third-party tools? Should we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, please.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that we hear a lot about Timesheets is that, you know, especially when we're talking to clients, it's like, not everybody in my organization works in Jira, but I want my people that do to be able to log their time, but I don't want everyone to have to get in there and use timesheets. And that's absolutely fine. One of the things that we found is that there are a ton of people that will use API to pull that timesheets data out and be able to report that in other timekeeping systems. So, if you have, a system where a majority of your organization logs time, but folks that work in Jira want to be able to kind of use that timesheets to get, again, that granular data. We do have a lot of folks that will use that method to kind of pull the Jira data, that Tempo time logs data out and use that outside of Tempo. And that's perfectly fine. That's exactly kind of what we intended it to be used for. Of course, there's a lot that you can do with it within the Tempo app, as we kind of talked about already. But, if you're logging time in Tempo timesheets, that data, very easy to, sort of extract and use wherever you need it.
Excellent. There's a couple questions here, Robbie, about the differences between structure and Jira plans, or formerly called advanced roadmaps. Would you like to give an answer to that one?
Sure. Yeah, I see there's one in there. It says, basically that structure and capacity planning feels a lot like Atlassian's plans, advanced roadmaps, Jira product discovery, so on and so forth. Absolutely. That's, we completely understand that. I think that when we're talking about Tempo, especially with structure, when we talk to folks that are using plans, they're using, or advanced roadmaps, one of the biggest, I want to say complaints. Well, I'll say complaints. One of the biggest complaints that people have is the sort of lack of being able to step outside of that sort of like sprint view. Being able to, if you're like non-agile, what does that look like? And so structure lets you add in a lot of additional customized or flexible columns, being able to view that data in any way that you want to. You're not necessarily held to what that structure, or let's just say what plans might say, these are the defined columns that we're allowing you to report on. Versus structure, which is, of course, that Gantt that is, of course, synced with Jira if you want it to be, being able to view things like capacity planning within structure. That was actually something that we didn't really talk about today, but again, capacity planner, you can see all of that data underneath that Gantt view, be able to see both teams and resources. So it's really all about visualizing that all in one place. So being able to kind of see what needs to be done, group that in any way that you want to, be able to break it down by teams, and then also be able to plan that on the side, have that sync over to Jira, and then see all of your resources and their capacity down at the bottom. Really kind of pulls all that together. But Jira product discovery, I did kind of want to touch on that too. I know that we talked very shortly about strategic roadmaps, but a big part of strategic roadmaps, as we've sort of more recently developed, is that sort of feedback and idea management. So strategic roadmaps allows for a lot of ideation. So being able to kind of say, we want to add this idea. Do we want to add that to our roadmap? Do we want to score it? Do we want to, use RICE? Do we want to use value versus effort, our own customized way of looking at it? You could take that information in through strategic roadmaps, add that to a roadmap, and then it can also sync down to your structure. So if you have those high level views that you want, and you want to just kind of push those down into structure instead of having to do that manually, you could do that and then plan from there. So it's all about sort of that interaction between the different modules and how all that works together as one big solution.
Excellent. All right, great answer. Got one about the BI connectors. What are the benefits of connecting Jira data to external BI tools through Tempo's BI connectors?
Well, the kind of the weird short answer to that is the Tempo data is going to be so that differentiator there. So one thing that we've seen with a lot of BI connectors is that they tend to focus specifically on Jira data. And really the point of that timesheets and the point of planner and financial manager is that we have the basic Jira data, but we want to have that additional granularity of what kind of time was logged, what was planned on something, being able to kind of pull all that information out. So it's more additive in that you're going to get sort of additional seasoning on that data when you're using that BI connector that really pulls both Tempo and Jira data all together. BI connector that we have has a lot of sort of pre-made things for Tempo type reporting. So they already kind of acknowledge that. So that, for example, the one that I showed on there on the screen was, specifically almost like a clone of Financial Manager with some additional information put into it from the Jira side of things. So with our BI connector, it's going to be focused on that specific auditing of what were your plans, what did people log as far as time goes, how much did it cost, what's my revenue. Being able to pull all that information out is really where that Tempo side of BI connectors is going to be different from perhaps what other ones you may find out there.
Excellent. Yeah. Got another question about reporting. It says, in my experience, doing any type of calcs to roll up any estimates, calculations to roll up any estimates, time logged, capacity numbers kind of stink in Jira. The JQL doesn't facilitate what I need, or the analytics piece doesn't hit the mark. Does your reporting tool allow for a low code / no code type of roll up with variety, or is there a lot of integration magic that needs to happen?
That's a great question. The short answer, because there's that first question in there: does your reporting tool allow for a low code, no code type of roll up with variety? Yes, it absolutely does. Especially when we're talking about structure and the columns that we already have almost pre-built in structure for you. So it really kind of depends on what. Actually, you mentioned it a little bit earlier: estimates, time log, and capacity numbers. Those kinds of things are when you're using structure. If you're using, like, for example, capacity planner and and timesheets in there, all of those are going to be sort of available already as columns within structure. And we're not sharing the screen right now, but as you imagine, there is a checkbox when you set that up that says, do I want to sum up everything that's underneath and roll it up to that high level, be it an initiative or a theme or, an epic by itself. You can have all those things rolled up very easily. All you're really doing is selecting, like, here are the things that I want to see, and it will sum all that up for you very easily. So you can use JQL if you want to, absolutely. But we do have a lot of pre-built stuff in there already.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we have time for a couple more. This one's about Financial Manager. What makes Financial Manager particularly effective for managing project profitability and ROI?
So there is within Jira, there's not necessarily a lot of costing settings, as far as like what, individuals work might cost or any billing that they might be associated with it. So it's really taking the fact that it takes that financial data, like with the resource allocation and the time cracking, and it rolls it all together for that like true project profitability. So it's not just, am I under budget? It's or am I above budget, whatever it is. Am I over budget? Oh no. But it'll give you that information live. So as people are doing work and they're logging that time, you'll be able to see, hey, this hockey stick that we've got going on with our costs, what's causing that? Being able to kind of go in and see, like, hey, this particular person or this team is spending way too much time on this one particular project. We need to find out why. And that's one of those things that Financial Manager really does kind of show you, not only that high level, so you could see that trend over time, but also gives you that ability to kind of dig in and see, like, well, what's causing that? How can we track? Was that something that we planned for? Is there someone entering their time in incorrectly? Those kinds of things. You can see all that information in Financial Manager, and it really just shows more than budget adherence. It's showing all of that all together.
Excellent. Here's a question I can answer. It says, do we need to have all these apps as a bundle? The answer, no, you don't have to have all of them. If you have all of them, they all do work together and they create a very powerful solution. But one of the things I mentioned earlier in the presentation was that with Tempo's modular, flexible portfolio of products, you can start anywhere in there. I think I mentioned as your greatest need or your greatest level of comfort, and then add on as you learn the tools and develop more need for more functionality. Like an example would be, you have timesheets, you're able to track time on various Jira tickets, you're able to organize time using Tempo accounts and Tempo teams. But say you want to have a report where you can compare the plan that you made versus the actual execution, you would get Capacity Planner, be able to build out that plan and then measure against the execution. And then you can keep on going from there. If you want, if you want to add financial management, you can get Financial Manager. And with all three of those products, Timesheets, Capacity Planner, and Financial Manager, you're even able to forecast costs of projects because it takes the plan and the execution, and then you're able to and the budget, and you're able to see, okay, am I going to hit my numbers the way that I want to? And then you can just keep on building from that. You have more reporting needs. You can add on custom charts or BI connectors. You have you know, project and portfolio management needs. You can add structure and so forth. Most of our products are very tightly integrated, so you don't have to buy them as a bundle. We'd love you to, but no, you can start with one and just keep on building. And I think we have time for one more question. So for timesheets, for Robbie, what sets timesheets apart from other time tracking tools when it comes to compliance and audit readiness?
That's a great question, and I think we covered some of that as we went through, but just kind of as a quick review, it's all about the sort of that detailed logging. So we talked a little bit, I think, in some of the earlier slides about those audit logs that are kind of being implemented right now, that project-based time approval. So you have folks that are working across a couple different projects that may have different managers, people who are responsible for those projects, and maybe those different managers need to be the ones to approve that time. So it's all about making sure that we have those approval workflows in place and so we can meet those compliance standards. But then again, the top part of that is the ability to see the granular data about what they were actually working on, being able to kind of plan based on that. It's really all about extra granular data and making sure that everyone can have their time in there correctly.
Thank you so much for that, Robbie. It looks like we're at time. I just want to reiterate that everyone who registered and attended this session will be emailed a copy of the recording. Also, we will follow up with you with answers to any of the questions that we didn't get to during the webinar. Thanks so much for joining.